We're live. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining our live stream today. We're really excited to be bringing you Arnie here. And I will be so happy to introduce Arnie in a bit. But first of all, for those who may have be interacting with us for the first time, we are Wicked Connections, and it stands for Wish You Knew Education Connections. What we're trying to do here is provide mentorship to students who may not have mentors in the exact field that they want. Mentorship has been proven to accelerate people's education and careers because it provides you a view into your blind spots. It teaches you things that you might not have known and you would wish that you knew otherwise. So what we're here to talk to you guys about today is two things with Arnie. The first part that we want to talk about is, of course, what is it like to actually be a nurse for anyone who's interested, and Arnie's advice for those who are exploring what they can do to help further their career and solidify whether or not this is the right path for them. The second thing we want to talk about is actually beyond nursing. We want to talk about what it's like to find your dream school and what it's like to actually be strong enough to overcome speed bumps, such as potentially not getting accepted the first time around into your dream school. And I find Arnie's story inspirational for so many reasons. So without further ado, we're going to begin Arnie's interview. So, hi Arnie. So I gave you a very brief introduction, but how about you take a moment and introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Arani. I am a registered nurse, and I've been working for about a year and a half right about now. I work at a hospital in London, Ontario as a float nurse, which means that I get to go to all the different adult inpatient units. So those are people who are over the age of 18, who are in hospital, staying for the day or overnight. And they're either getting medical work done or surgeries done.
All right.
So yeah.
I think we'll definitely get into a little bit more nitty gritty about nursing. So the first question I had, if we can, I know you described at a high level, what nurses do, but and I think a lot of us reflect on nurses based off of our experience, like when we interact with them. But nurses do a lot more, not in front of the patients, and also they work with such an array of patients that probably every individual hasn't experienced everything a nurse does. So can you walk us through what do nurses actually do skill-wise, and leading up to that, what makes them successful? So this is skills, soft skills, personalities, things that you think are really important and for nurses.
Yeah, one of the great things about nursing is that it's such a diverse profession. Nurses work in a vast variety of roles, not just in hospitals and clinics, but also in like nursing homes, in the prison system. They also work in public health, creating healthy policies and guidelines for the public to be safe. They also work in like health informatics, so they create electronic health systems to kind of manage and deliver healthcare. And they also are involved in education. So I work in a hospital, and I do something called bedside nursing. So in that contains a specific role and skills. So I can talk about that. So I think some of the things that would help with bedside nursing is having compassion, empathy, respect, having good communication skills because you work in a team, and also having the willingness to learn. I think those things are essential to providing safe patient care. Um, and what was the other part of the question? I think the role. So most of my day, I'm doing a lot of assessments, so of the different health systems in the body. So I'll be checking their vital signs, so their blood pressure. I'll be listening to their lungs, their tummy, and I'll be monitoring for any changes. So if there's anything concerning that comes up, we'll intervene and we'll talk to the healthcare team that includes the doctors and the physiotherapists and occupational therapists and respiratory therapists. There's a lot of people involved, and we intervene as best as we can. And then we also provide meds and we document a lot. We document everything that we do.
So that's like such a great answer because even I myself am learning so much despite having spoken to you about nursing before. So what it sounds like is, first of all, I think typically when people think nursing, they think of bedside nursing. What you're currently doing, Arani. But I loved how you explained how nursing graduates go to various industries, including education or policy, or even things like creating tools. Like that's so neat. So and that's really interesting to explore. And just for my awareness, would you say the majority are bedside nurses, or it's pretty like evenly mixed into the other types of nursing as well?
I would say that majority are in bedside nursing, but I'm sure there are like a lot more opportunities that I'm unaware of. So it's such a huge profession. So it's really cool.
So although it's a really huge profession, we do want to anchor on your specific story. So can you tell us a little bit about when and why did you personally choose to explore nursing? And to keep in mind, our audience are people maybe in high school or interested. So anything that you think would appeal to them, like ways that they could get in contact and think questions that they should be asking, that would be great to hear.
Yeah. I've kind of, when you're little, you kind of always have an idea of what you would like to do. So I was always interested in like the human body, and I also want to pursue a job where I helped others. So then my first instinct was to kind of go into medicine at first, which is like common for a lot of people if they're interested in healthcare. So I kind of started off there, and then I think towards high school when we started in Ontario in Canada, we take a course called careers where you kind of get the chance to explore different career options, and they kind of cater towards like you going down a certain stream. Because also have different tests that you would do and opportunities to research different jobs. So I was definitely looking at different roles in healthcare. I came across nursing, but I also still was like not sure what the role was or what they really did. So I decided to actually volunteer at the hospital in the city that I was in. And there I got a really cool chance to work or to help out on a unit in the hospital. And there I actually got to see that that nurses were running these units and all the amazing work that they're doing. I also got to see what doctors were doing too. But the one thing that really like connected was that the nurses were always there with their patients. They're there during the good times and the bad times. So I really felt like that's something that I wanted to do, and I can see myself in that role. So I think that was kind of like the turning point of like, okay, this is something that I really want to do. And I started looking more into it. So I started to research, okay, how do I become a nurse? So I knew to become a registered nurse. So we have two different roles. We have registered nurse and registered practical nurse. So that one is you have to get a bachelor's degree, and the other one you can get a diploma for. So I wanted to do the registered nurse program. So I kind of explored how I can get there. So I think that's important step to take if you're deciding to go down a career path. Like, what are the steps that you have to take to get to where you want to be? So I did that, and I knew that I had to go to university for that. So I was exploring different programs that were available and the different schools that offered it, because certain schools, especially for nursing, only certain schools have that program. So I was a little bit limited, I would say. And then I also looked into what are my chances of getting in. So I didn't know how competitive nursing was at the time, and how limited spots there are as well. So, and grades are, it's hard to kind of like when you see average and you're striving for it, but in high school you're going through so much too, and there's so much pressure. So I was like there, but I wasn't fully to like the averages that I wanted to get to the schools that I was more leaning towards. Um, so I was actually leaning towards a specific school that I wanted to Western University. Just it wasn't just because of nursing itself, but it was because of what they had to offer for their students. I felt like I got a chance to tour on different universities, and I felt like connected to Western. And I knew university wasn't just going to be an academic experience. It was going to be an opportunity to grow as a person, and I wanted to make sure that like there's enough extracurricular activities that I want to join, and that they had a good social experience there too. I also want to live away from home and have that and be more independent. Those are things I was really looking at, not on top of like the program that they had. So I think I had my eyes set on that university. So when I started applying, I applied to several different universities, nursing programs specifically, and then so I also applied to some general programs just to keep my options open at the time. And then I did get into some nursing programs, but it wasn't at the school that I wanted to. So I had to make the ultimate decision of whether I wanted to go to my dream school or should I do a program at a school that maybe I wasn't too excited to go to. And I decided to go to Western. It was crushing at first because I didn't get into the nursing program. But I figured that I feel like it was a good place to start, and I knew that there was at that time that it wasn't the end of the road, and that I had more opportunities to come. Okay. So yeah, I went with that.
I think there was a lot of gold in what you just said, Arnie. So maybe to summarize, in the beginning, more about finding the program, nursing, you started by using the subjects and the skills that you like to narrow down health science. And then within there, what really helped you was actually volunteering and AKA job shadowing, like seeing people in action so that you could get more than what is typically written in a job description, and you probably saw some things that originally you didn't think to put in your career search, right? Like things like compassion or empathy, or what you said, like being that front line. Like it really sounds as though nurses are that first line of defense. They're the ones that are the champion for the patients. And usually, I guess, even when I think about jobs, I think more so like, oh, what is the actual task they're doing, as opposed to like, who are they, right? Like, what is their position? So I think I love that, like how you got involved. And I would highly recommend that, not just for people interested in nursing or even health science, but for all fields. Like there's definitely ways that you can try your best to job shadow and see what it's like. Like, do you like the day-to-day life that they live? Because I know nursing can be a little hectic. You're on your feet, you're running around, versus what I do as a consultant, as a desk job. So it's very, very different, and I love that approach. And then segueing into the second part of your answer, which was about then finalizing your school, I really loved how you chose the school not just based on nursing. Of course, that was the first filter because, as you mentioned, there's limited schools. But you looked at additional things like whether or not you want to be at home or not, because that affects a lot of things like your experience in university, your mental health, etc. And I found it so brave that even though you got into a nursing program, it wasn't your dream, and you said, I'm not going to settle. I'm gonna go for it. I'm gonna go for it again. And I think not a lot of people would be as brave as you to do that. So can you talk us through a little bit more about that? Like, walk us through your thought process. Like when you had those two options in front of you, basically nursing guaranteed now, but not at the dream school, versus your dream school and the potential to get in the future. It's not guaranteed. It was still just a potential. Why did you end up choosing what you did? And what were the questions you asked? AKA, what would you tell students to ask themselves if they were in the same position?
It was definitely a tough decision, and I contemplated back and forth, and I honestly had it really hard, but I had a lot of support and I had a lot of conversations with close ones about what I wanted and what my gut feeling was. I think at the end of the day, you always have a feeling and that you should always follow it. Um, a lot of the questions were like, well, if I don't do nursing, will I ever get the opportunity to be a nurse? Can I ever be a nurse? And I think at first I thought, no, like there's no other way. If I don't do this program, I'll never be a nurse. But that's not true. There's always other ways I can get to a career path. It's not always a linear path. So I knew that there was like, I could always reapply after a year after doing a program. And I knew there's also programs, compressed programs available, which you can do kind of midway through your degree or even after completing a degree. And then if I really couldn't get in, and I can also apply to other schools too. So I knew I got into nursing schools at the time, and I ultimately wanted that experience at that university. But I knew that at the end of the day, after getting the degree in general health sciences, which I was doing, I could always reapply to another school and get in because I knew I got in the first
Right.
time.
Okay, so it wasn't a complete, shot in the dark. Like you had a frame of reference that said you were capable, but maybe there were some areas that you needed to up so that you can get into the dream school. So it wasn't that you got into no programs, but you still decided to go for it. You had a bit of a baseline. Okay.
Exactly. But yeah, it was hard for me to see that. I think I had other people tell me
Okay.
that because I think at that moment you're also, you're down on yourself and you can't
Yeah.
think straight. So yeah, I was lucky to have those
That's
people to say that to boost my confidence and
Oh,
support
that's
me.
amazing that you had those people. And, I know when you're like, I still remember being in grade 12 and applying, and it's a really nerve wracking experience because when you're applying, especially with other people applying to the same programs, even if they are, acquaintances, it starts to feel slightly competitive. Like, what if they get in and you don't? Like, you start comparing yourself, you just can't help it. But to surround yourself with people positively, people going for the same thing, people not. I think that was really important because sometimes like they see you differently than how you see yourself. I think some psychologists say, when most of the time when people think about themselves, they're much harder on themselves than they would be if it were their best friend. For example, like if it was their best friend, they would be much more positive, much more optimistic. So I really appreciate that, like that you specifically called out that you leaned on your support system when you're making that decision to help give another perspective. So if someone, let's say, maybe there's someone else who didn't get into their program at all, because you got into the programs, but it was just not at the dream school. So it's a bit of a smaller jump. What type of advice would you give? Maybe someone who maybe didn't get into the program at all. Like, what would there be a reason for them to keep going, or like what should they be reflecting on? Do you think?
They can look at like, at every school, there's always a set of requirements they need, and maybe they can take a look and see which of those requirements they're not fulfilling. I know with competitive averages, it's also really hard, and it's been going up every year, but you can take a look and maybe even see which grades that they need to improve on and try to try to maybe even redoing a course if they need to. I don't think I did decide to go into university, but I could have also easily stayed back a year and taken some extra courses and improved my grades and go into the program, maybe even a little bit more confidently because I had
Right.
that those the information that I
That's
needed.
great advice, Arnie. I know a lot of people, even if they just take one semester and they redo or take
Mhm.
a mixture of new and old, some core courses, it really helps their average. It also helps them, like you said, like one extra year to, get everything together, right? Get yourself together. Like it can make a big deal, especially, when you're, 16, 17, 18, like it's still pretty young. I know everyone feels like they're an adult at that point, but we're all still growing.
Yeah.
And I like how you explain it. Like you could, stay back and do more courses there, or you could take your route, which is maybe go into a general program, use some of those credits as a different, like you're applying as a different candidate. But I think what you're saying is you need to show growth. and there's different areas that you need to grow. So reflect on it based on the criteria, because I would also agree that they're pretty transparent with their criteria. Oftentimes it's grades is of course for all programs, and then extracurriculars as well, leadership positions, and again, that's another opportunity to get involved. So it's definitely not over by any means. And if, like, let's say, and it's really, I would say, I guess, would you agree, like, it's kind of your call when you decide to give up? Like, is there a rule of thumb or anything like that, or?
I would say, I mean, maybe you can also like, I would say explore your options a little bit more. Maybe if that path that you're going, maybe if it's not best suited for you, try to open up and see if
Right.
there's any other options. Maybe there's another career path that's similar to it that maybe that you might actually have more interest in. Or I would say like, don't also try not to stay focused or have a tunnel vision as well. So I mean, I tried to do that at university as well, but ultimately ended up going back to nursing. But I tried to look at other career
Yeah.
options as well that might be
I think you made a
good
really
for
great
me.
point, Arnie, because I know there's a lot of articles saying how millennials and now the future Gen Z, they will be switching careers so often. Versus the boomer generation, they often stayed with one, two, maybe three companies, so basically their whole life. Versus our generation, we're going to be switching jobs. And that's because we're finding out new things. Jobs are changing themselves. Like every day with technology, they're changing. What does it mean to be a nurse? I'm sure. So I really appreciate that, because a lot of people told me, not just about nursing, but other programs, they told me they were so glad that they didn't get in because they realized they weren't actually a fit for it. And it was a blessing in disguise, because the people doing admissions, they realize, hey, we don't think this person's a fit. And maybe you don't see it at that point because, again, we all have blind spots, but someone else saw it and someone else helped them, force them to have an open mind, and then they're much happier at the end of the day. So I really love that, like having an open mind. Okay, so let's return back to nursing. Like, let's assume, everyone who's interested in nursing, they've done their due diligence. Now they are actually starting their co-op or full-time experience. Can you tell me, were there any previous misconceptions you had about nursing that proved to be wrong? And this could be you personally, or like common like learnings from your colleagues.
Yeah, there's a lot. I definitely didn't know what it was until I fully was. Honestly, even when I started, until I started working, to be honest. Um, but just like I said earlier, like the different types of nursing. I think another also common misconception is that the nurse works under the doctor and the doctor kind of has control over everything. But it's actually so not true. It's a very team-based environment. We work all as a team. We talk to each other, we feed off each other of ideas. And I think now even physicians, they're being trained to kind of work with that approach as well. So um, that's really good. And nursing is actually a self-regulated profession, so that means we do have practice standards and competencies, but that we have to meet up. That's like based off of that the government set up for us. But there's no one actually watching over us and managing like how we do our job on a daily basis. So that I didn't really know about either.
Wow.
Another misconception is that only females are nurses. That is so not true. I think there's an increasing amount of male nurses into the profession now, and they are amazing and they do great work. And I think we need more, to be
Yeah, I
honest.
think, Arnie, you even told me
Um,
that some places were trying to specifically hire male nurses because they were low. Is that true? Like sometimes. Mm-hmm.
yeah. I know, like, I think it's unfortunate that they have that idea that it's only for
Yeah.
females, but yeah, and so like I feel like they make a great addition to the team, and yeah, you're right, they do try to scout out for male
Yes,
nurses
it
in
just
some
shows how
areas.
promising it is for everyone to get involved. Because I think you mentioned like the reason why, like sometimes you're working very up and close with patients, and some patients prefer nurses of the same gender. Is that true? Is that why?
Some people they might for cultural reasons, but I honestly would say a lot of times, like a lot of people, they're okay. I feel like even just saying that you're a nurse, people are more open to it, and you kind of break a barrier, so they're okay with that. that you're providing them with that care. So they're actually a lot of people are really open
Okay.
to it. So yeah, I haven't met any, I haven't seen too many cases
Okay.
where
Okay.
that happens a
Okay.
lot.
And
But yeah.
I love like the misconception you mentioned, especially the comparison to doctor. I think because like when people think hospital, they think doctor and nurse. But it does sound as though the way from an outsider, how it sounds like to me is that you're the one working very closely with the patient and you bring in resources as needed. As you mentioned, sometimes the resource is the doctor, sometimes the resource is the physiotherapist. Is that like, would you describe it? Is my understanding more like correct?
Yeah, like we are mostly at like working with the patient and we're at the bedside at most of the times, but we do try to usually on the weekdays we try to meet up with everyone in the team and kind of we do like bullet rounds or
Right.
rounds and we talk about the patient and what they need.
Okay.
So sometimes I'll be everyone's there and present so we can kind of be like, okay, this person needs this a little bit more and maybe this person can help them out with that. So we'll do stuff like that.
Okay.
So
Yeah, and clearly, just by describing it like that, it definitely doesn't seem like a simple execution. You very much customize your strategy for
mhm,
each patient. There's a lot of thought that goes into it. So it sounds as though then there's a
mhm,
lot of soft skills, and probably that's why you mentioned really good communication. Like,
mhm.
okay, is there any other misconceptions you'd like to cover here?
Um, I think uh,
Okay.
no, I think
Yeah,
that's
and
pretty much
those are
it.
really good
Yeah.
things, at least to start off with, to kind of bust that myth. Okay, so if someone
Mhm,
said like, you know what, they heard you talk and they're like, this really feels like it is the career for me. I know you advised, through your personal journey, volunteering at hospitals, job shadowing. So I think already you had some good advice there. Is there any other advice you would give them in terms of exploring the profession or maybe anything else regarding nursing?
Yeah, I would definitely recommend trying to, if you know anyone or hear of anyone who is in the field, to talk with them and chat with them because they might be in a different role, especially if they're in public health or community or in long term care, what their role would be in that environment. So that'll be really good as well. And then you can also, do your research on the internet. There's like some great videos out there too of nurses who talk about their experience. I think they're also upcoming on YouTube as well. So I would definitely go check them out as well. Also I think what I did earlier on is I tried to get CPR and first aid training. I think that's a great first step into kind of like providing emergency medical care. So if you are really interested and kind of want to get that hands-on experience, that'll be a good first step too. It is a requirement as well, but I think if you kind of want to get a head start, I think it's totally okay doing it ahead of time. Um, and then also, if there's any like workshops or conferences or anyone speaking that's in healthcare, or there might be even a nurse
Yeah.
present, like if it's a
Yeah.
conference or anything. So definitely keep your eye out. It'll definitely be a different perspective. So I would recommend to attend those. And then yeah, like definitely do your research on different programs. That would be
I
my
think those are a lot
recommendation.
of great recommendations. And I love what you mentioned, like some very accessible things like online, like hearing people speak about the profession or maybe even blog about the profession, as well as like more intense things like conferences that are specifically made for the healthcare field. That's really interesting. Like I personally hadn't gone to a conference. Like I only went to university fair, but a conference would be really cool because it's a spotlight on the different professions and it could really help you make the distinguishing decision just like you did. And before I let you go,
Mhm.
Arnie, one clarification question I forgot to ask earlier was you mentioned something between registered nurse and registered practical nurse. Can you just quickly also explain the difference? Like I know you said what, like the first one, registered nurse, you do bachelor's. The second one, you can get a diploma. What is the difference in the actual job? Like, can they also be a bedside nurse?
They can as well. The only thing is we have something called a scope of practice, so that has it's our we have like legal limits of what we can do. So there is a difference between what an RN can do and what an RPN do. But if you're going to work in the hospital actually can set limits as well. So they in some places they can do pretty much what an RN could do, like skill wise. I do find that RNs are in a little bit more of a leadership role, or
Yeah.
in that sense, but they also work in the community as well, and they have like their own practice. The only thing is, I do find that if you do want to advance your career, because you can get a master's in nursing and pursue like a more specialized role. In that case, you can't really go expand further if you do have the diploma. So a lot of nurses then there's a bridge program to RPN to RN. So they often do that.
And I think that's really great, Arnie. So it sounds as though right off graduation, a lot of the actual roles, they do overlap. There are nuances, there are differences, but a lot of the differences you see further into your career, such as where you want to advance, ability to do masters, etc. But there's a lot of options, especially with the bridge program, which is really helpful. And can you just quickly describe what a bridge program is for anyone who hasn't heard of that before?
Um, I think, well, a lot of times I think there's certain universities that do like specific bridge program. That's essentially a lot of it's online too. It kind of covers what we learned in school as an RN. They might have to go over some stuff that they covered in RPN school as well. I'm not too familiar with it, but they do it like over a certain period of time, and they would have to complete placements as well, taken on as an RN role. They do take over a certain number of years. I'm not 100% sure how long it takes, but a lot of nurses they do it over their time while they're working as well, so they don't have to physically be in a school to do it. A lot of times it's over online.
So from my
Yeah.
understanding, reflecting on other bridge programs too, they tend to be shorter, and it is what it sounds like. They're trying to get you those extra bit of learning to bridge the gap between the diploma and the degree, so that you are in even playing field, and then you can pursue the similar opportunities again. Okay, awesome. Well, Arnie, thank you so much for your time and insights, both into the depth of what it means to be a nurse, as well as what it means to actually search and commit to your dream school. And I think a lot of students would find that so helpful. So to the students who have been listening and thought like, hey, I want more, like I want Arnie to dive into different areas, like I want to hear more about what nurses in the research field do, etc. One thing we do offer is a mentorship program. So you guys can reach out to us separately through whichever channel you're viewing this. You can contact us. And what we try to do is we set you up with a mentor in the field that you want, whether you're just broadly thinking healthcare or you're 100% into nursing. It is, as Arnie mentioned, another way to further your knowledge by talking to those people in the field. So we highly recommend it. I know that we both benefited from mentorship, and it's been really powerful. So thank you so much, Arnie, for sharing your very, very valuable story. I know personally I learned a lot, so I can only imagine how much someone in high school who is gunning for nursing, how much this conversation was helpful. So thank you so much for your time.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. We're going to sign off now. Well, I hope everyone has a great night or morning wherever you're tuning in the world. Take care. Bye.